am a museum doctor. I help to make sure that museums are healthy and thriving. When no one visits them, or they run out of space, or they're irrelevant, or they're confusing, I'm part of a great team of people that helps them to get their mojo back. I also heal with museums. I offer cities and neighborhoods and countries a museum as a remedy to some of the ills that they're facing. Museums are the drugs that I'm pushing, or at least the non-patented, all-natural remedy that I advise. Officially, I'm a museum planner with Lord Cultural Resources, which is a global consultancy that helps to plan, develop, and improve museums all over the world. How many of you think that museums are important? That's nice. How many of you have been to a museum in the last week? Not so many. The last month? The last year? Okay. We think museums are important for other people. We don't necessarily think of museums when faced with the challenges of finding a new job. We don't think of museums as a place to get oriented in a new country. We don't think of a museum as a place to mend a broken heart. But museums do all of these things, and they could and they should be doing even more. We need to take a new look at our museums and what they can do for us. There are about 80,000 museums throughout the world. In the US alone, they receive about 850 million visits. That's more than the attendance to all major league sporting events and theme parks combined. Museums in Europe receive about 500 million visitors. In Germany, it's about 100 million visitors. 3 out of 4 adults in Sweden, Estonia, and Norway visit museums. In the UK, it's about 1 in 2. Half of all tourists to the UK and 70% of all student tourists to the UK visit museums. People are drawn to museums. Museums have soft power. Soft power is the ability to influence people through persuasion, attraction, or setting the agenda. It's about getting people to want what you want and act accordingly. It's a term that was first coined by international relations expert Joseph Nye to refer to the influence that countries can have in global geopolitics outside of their military or economic might, which is hard power. Soft power is at work, for example, with the proliferation of the English language as a language of business. So when we all aspire to learn English, when we all speak English, it's a sign of the soft power of the Anglophony at work. Museums have soft power in that they are landmarks and placemakers in the cities where they are in. They attract tourists and locals, schools, and donors, and they influence people through their exhibitions, their programs, their collections and research, and their networks. In the past, museums were the mouthpieces of hard power. They displayed the trophies of nobility, the spoils of war and colonialism. Their exhibitions were based on the hierarchy of civilizations. They celebrated the records of great men. Even with the advent of the first public museums in the 18th century in Europe, which ostensibly had a civic mission, they were there to educate and therefore to civilize the working classes. Museums were still developed by the elite and maintained the elite to perpetuate a particular social order. But things are changing. Many museums have many different sources of funding, and they have legislatively protected arm's length independence from government. They are becoming part of civil society, which is that social commons between the market and government. This is not just a major shift in patronage, it's a major shift in identity and accountability. As civil society institutions, museums aren't just there to do good for the people, they belong to the people. Their soft power lies in their ability to connect with their constituents, which is all of us. Museums now are more ours than they have ever been. But they don't always feel like it. The other day, I was at a museum, and I saw a teacher with a group of about 4 or 5-year-olds about ready to go into the museum. And they were just on the outside, and they were all standing in line, holding hands. And just before they went in, she turned to them and she said, What do we do in a museum? Shh. I can't tell you how many times I've been doing something in a museum, and I'm not talking about stripping in front of a sculpture, and someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, you can't do that here." And I say, "Why not?" And they say, "Because this is a museum." In museum culture, we are silent. We are subservient. We unquestioningly take the information that we are given. We are the recipients, not the creators of knowledge. But what if we use the soft power of museums in a different way? Most museums are in cities, which is also where most of the population since 2008 now lives. We can use museums to address some of the most serious ills affecting cities today, like inequality and social exclusion. Millions of people are at risk for being completely shut out of what happens in the places around them. They're excluded from the economic workforce, they don't have a political voice, and they're socially and culturally isolated. Where once museums were instruments of exclusion, can we make them into tools for inclusion? Museums help us innovate and create. We know that artists, for example, need to be surrounded by the work of other artists and have opportunities to make in order for them to thrive. But you know what? Creativity and knowledge are also essential skills in our knowledge economy. Did you know, for example, that 15 to 20% of physicists, chemists, and medical researchers who win Nobel Prizes have hobbies in crafts? And that engineers and scientists who have a background in making things are much more likely to get patents and to start businesses related to their innovation than other people? So if you want to be the next Leonardo da Vinci, or you want your kid to be the next Leonardo da Vinci, perhaps you need to take them to a maker lab at a science museum, like the Muse Science Museum in Italy, where they have a fab lab where they give equipment and space and training for people to create and make. I talked earlier about social exclusion. As a serial immigrant, the challenges faced by newcomers is a subject that's really close to my heart. I know how hard it is to try and make your way into a new country, a new place. And this isn't just my issue. Increasingly, the populations of cities are foreign-born, here in Europe and in North America, in the Gulf. And they're foreign-born not just from elsewhere, but also from the rural areas coming into cities. Museums can help us be integrated and valued. Like, this is a great program at the Brera National Picture Gallery in Italy, where they train migrants with mediators with a background in immigration to really look at the works of art and then to connect their stories to certain themes that are depicted by the work of art. They co-create a tour with the museum curators, which not only try to make links on subjects like faith or family with the collections, but they also try and develop intercultural skills, which is an essential 21st century skill. Things like understanding there's multiple identities, multiple perspectives, challenging stereotypes. And in fact, museums are very, very good at developing skills like innovation, creativity, intercultural skills. Museum tours are proven to increase curiosity, critical thinking, and the level of tolerance among people who visit them. And we come to our hearts. Life is hard. Relationships can make us or break us. Resilient people recover better from trauma than other people. And that's statistics from me, by the way. But I challenge you to tell me I'm wrong. Museums build resilience when they connect your individual pain to the pain of other people, when you can see your own story within a broader narrative. Like here at the Museum of Broken Relationships in Zagreb, Croatia. About 1,600 people here have donated the spoils of love, the remnants of relationships gone wrong. There are a lot of teddy bears. You can see one in the corner, ripped up love notes. There's an old boyfriend's hat. There's even an axe, which was used by someone on someone else when they found out that they were cheating. And after you've had your cathartic moment at the Museum of Broken Relationships, you can go on to meet much better people who will treat you much better in a museum like this one. This is the Beanie House of Art and Knowledge, and last year they did a cultural apothecary where they constructed this whole antiquated apothecary out of cardboard. And then they worked with people in the community, children and adults, to give happiness prescriptions. So during a 2-week period, you could go there and you could tell the person, the dispenser, who was a performer, what you were feeling, and they would give you a prescription. So something like, blowing rose petals to the wind, or connecting to their collections, roar like a lion. You can imagine how successful that was. About 65% reported to be feeling happier, more inspired, and very happy after participating in that experience. And in fact, the Happy Museum Project, which is a fantastic project involving about 22 museums in the UK, has demonstrated that people rate their well-being associated with museums at about £3,200 a year. It's an economist doing the evaluation, but with sport or art at £2,000 a year. People like museums. And if that isn't enough, museums actually make you healthier. Researchers at the University of California, Berkeley, have found that great art and great nature helps to boost the immune system, reduces the inflammation associated with things like heart disease and diabetes and other things. So a museum a day can really help to keep the doctor away. Aren't you all itching to go to a museum right now? Yeah. Well, they're not all like that. For museums to use their soft power in this way is a choice. Many museums continue to perpetuate old power relationships. So for museums to develop their soft power in a way that includes us all, we've come up with 32 ways to activate soft power. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to go through the top 5. Museums have to be free. Many museums are free, but many are not. When they're free, they attract more people, they attract different kinds of people, people come more frequently, and although they stay for less time, they get the benefits more regularly. In the UK in 2001, the Department of Culture, Ministry and Sport, which is the then name, introduced free museums. In 7 months, there was a 67% increase in attendance. Within 10 years, the attendance had tripled, and the amount of ethnic minorities who had visited had doubled. In China, in 2008, they made 1,800 of their museums free, and there were millions of rural migrant workers and urban working poor who came to the museums. Museums need to be open when we need them to be. I think you all have the Long Night of Museums here in Germany. How many of you go to that? The Long Night of Museums tends to attract more people than would go to a museum during normal working hours. The Nuit Nocturne in Brussels is the same thing. During a 4-month period, they're open every Thursday till 10, and they attract a much different crowd of people. Museums have to be diverse. Cities are diverse. Museums need to reflect the diversity of their populations. Having staff at all levels that reflects diversity is a powerful invitation for all kinds of people to come in. Museums need to value their programs. You've just heard about all these great programs that museums are doing, and there are thousands more. But when we think of museums, we just think of their exhibitions. The programs are often not marketed. People don't associate those with museums. Museums with soft power need to value their program. And fifthly, museums have to listen, and they have to respond. Museums are like companies in the 21st century, and they're very hierarchical institutions. Museum directors are very educated and very revered, and sometimes they don't listen as much as they could to their staff or to other people. But museum leaders who share power have powerful museums. It's not all up to museums. Museums are ours now. Remember? Too often, we are complicit in maintaining the old power structures of museums. We keep quiet, we do as we're told, sometimes without even knowing why. But what if this happened? A few weeks ago, in Barcelona, where I live, there was a festival for the Bangladeshi community, right on the steps of one of the big art museums there. Hundreds of people enjoying arts and culture, but no one went into the museum. What if we made an explicit invitation in people's own languages? What if this happened? We could connect music to the museum collections and share it with others. Or this. Have you ever heard such quiet teenagers, unaccompanied? What if it sounded more like a mall? But don't worry, not all of the time. What if we all did this? Like we walked into a museum and we were given a tag that we could wear if we wanted to say, I'm ready to talk. And then when we went to exhibitions, instead of sitting there side by side looking at the art in silent communion, we actually were able to turn to the person next to us and have a conversation. What if we actually started talking to strangers in a museum? How radical would that be? Or have you ever noticed that you can't ever work in a museum? There may be a place somewhere else you can work, but you can't work in the galleries or the exhibitions right where something is happening. What if you could work there? What if you were invited with Wi-Fi? You could download sources, you could find out who actually wrote the museum text, even have a coffee? You could create art in a museum. Or what if we regularly became the curators? And this is actually an example of a children's council at Museu Blau in Barcelona, where they're busy advising the museum director on what they wanted to see in their museums. Museums are remarkable places. And the next time that you go there, I challenge you to do something that makes that museum work for you. And then take a photo, put a hashtag on it, and share it with others. Museums are places that help newcomers find their way. They're places that can make us feel confident and creative. They build all kinds of skills. They can make us feel like we belong, they can mend a broken heart, and they can make us happy. Museums are powerful. Let's see what they can do.